Muy buenas tardes, siendo las 18 horas, les saluda el profesor Cristian Cristóful, coordinador del Departamento de Inglés del Instituto Superior de Lenguas, en calidad de moderador. Se da inicio a la defensa virtual de la tesina acorde a la resolución 413/2021 que fija fecha y hora de la tesina con el título Analysis of Translation Techniques Used to Translate Idioms, Slangs, and Jopara language from the Paraguayan movie Cajas into English, a cargo de las autoras Patricia, Ileana, Caribaux, Marchi y María Fernanda Pereira Maidana, de la carrera de lengua inglesa del Instituto Superior de Lengua. El día de hoy, viernes 7 de mayo del 2021, nos acompaña la profesora Romina Bento, en calidad de presidente del Tribunal Examinador. Muy buenas tardes, profesora.
Buenas tardes, profesor Cristóful.
Bienvenida. En
Gracias.
calidad de miembro del Tribunal Examinador, las profesoras Sharon Weaver y Ileana Núñez. Muy buenas tardes, profesora.
Good afternoon, thank you. Gracias.
Buenas tardes a todas, ¿cómo están?
Entonces, las postulantes universitarias, sean muy bienvenidas. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, ¿cómo están?
Bien, gracias. Entonces, profesora Romina Bento, usted ahora queda con el manejo del desarrollo de la defensa.
Bien. Bueno, chicas, empiecen con su presentación cuando ustedes consideren que están listas. Les escuchamos.
Perfecto, gracias. Okay, so our topic is the analysis of translation techniques used to translate idioms, slangs, and Jopara language from Paraguayan movie Siete Cajas, Seven Boxes into English. So communication has proven to be one of the most important activities humans and animals are capable of doing. People are able to communicate through language, actions, and objects. Communication has no limits. It doesn't matter if people do not live in the same country or even in the same continent. Communication always finds a way to get to be communicated. Even when people do not share the same language, the same beliefs, the same culture, the same history, all of these can be communicated through signals, symbols, images, body language, and most importantly, written and spoken words. The purpose of communication is to deliver a message that can be understood by the receptors. But this seems to be easy, but actually can be quite difficult, especially if the communication is unknown or strange to the receptor. Also, especially when the message is culturally attached to a specific group of people or country, and when the language is also different from the receptor. As mentioned, communication has no limits, but there are also barriers that can prevent the message to be delivered successfully. In this case, we also have, luckily, some tools that can help the communication to be the message to be delivered correctly. And when it comes to the language as a barrier, we do have the translation. Translation is a complex task, especially if we, especially when the message is adapted, is culturally, it refers to a specific culture or a specific group of people. But and there's when the translator job becomes very important, because the translator has as a job to deliver a high quality translation in which the message, the essence of the source language is not lost, while also attempting to translate it into the target language. I wrote something, and that translators have not only to render expression into another language, but they also transfer culture. This is really important because translators do not only translate words, they translate meaning, they translate the essence of things. And when something is culturally attached, such as our topic is, they need to, it gets more complicated because the translator might not be in direct contact with the culture itself. So this research project is concerned with the analysis of, as mentioned, with the analysis of translation techniques used to translate the successful Paraguayan movie Siete Cajas into English. Just to give you a brief information about this movie, it was filmed in 2010. The script was written by Juan Carlos Maneglia, and it was filmed directed by Juan Carlos Maneglia and also Tana Chimbori. And this is one of the most successful movies in our country, and it's very known worldwide. This movie also got a nomination for the Goya Awards. It didn't win it, but still. As a movie mixes Guarani Spanish, which combined it's also comes the Jopara, and many other Paraguayan expressions, idioms and slangs. All these became our major interest into it was to analyze the translation techniques used to translate the slangs, idioms, and the Jopara into English. So films are really important. We learn a lot from films. We learn about culture. We learn about history. And the role of the translation in movies is to make the message easier, more understandable for the audience. And in the movies Siete Cajas, translation quality is extremely important because not only Spanish was used, but also Jopara. Jopara is the mixture or the combination between Guarani and Spanish that come together and become Jopara. And the aim of this work is to determine if the techniques used to translate used in the translation process were able to maintain the quality in the source language. This becomes really important, especially for this movie, because as mentioned before, the movie portrays our culture, part of our life as a Paraguayan. So people outside our country might not know many things about us. They might not know that we do speak Guarani, which is an official language here in our country. They might not understand what Jopara is, and about also what is portrayed in the movie. So if the translation has a huge role in this movie. So the purpose of the study, as mentioned before, is to provide an analysis of the translation techniques used to translate slangs, idioms, and Jopara from the Paraguayan movie, very successful Paraguayan movie, Siete Cajas, into English. Subtitles that appear on the original DVD of the movie. And the aim is to determine if the techniques used to translate them maintain the same context of the source language. And the results will provide a major understanding of how Paraguayan expressions and vocabulary, Guarani, the Jopara, were translated, and if the meaning of these words and phrases were maintained. And furthermore, the results might become a very useful resource for future translators interested in translating other Paraguayan movies, poems, songs in Guarani, and other sources from Paraguay. So our main question guiding our research is what translation techniques were used in translation of slangs, idioms, and Jopara words of the Paraguayan movie Siete Cajas into the English subtitles that appear in the original DVD. And the sub-questions are how were the techniques to translate the slangs, idioms, and Jopara words in the English translation applied? And also if did the translation techniques used in the English subtitles help to maintain the meaning of the words and expressions of the source language into the target language. The relevance of the study, I think that for us is very special because we actually were it took us a long time to decide what topic we wanted to study. But I truly believe that this one inspired us. It was actually also fun to watch the movie, and mainly, the significance of this study is based on the research techniques used to translate specific words and phrases that belong to our country. The Guarani is nowadays, it's been studied for a long time already by many different linguists and grammarians all over the world. But its colloquial use, the Jopara, hasn't been approached, neither has the Guarani, in terms of being an interest for study in cinematography. And the most important role of this study is that constitutes one of the few research focused on a topic that unifies two different things as translations, as the element that represent our country, which is the language, Guarani, the Jopara as well, and with the growing audiovisual art, which is something that nowadays, especially now, there's a new movie released, which is Matar a un Muerto, Killing at Death, which has also been almost nominated to an Oscar award. So obviously the movie was also translated into English, so it's growing in our country, luckily. So we encountered some limitations when it comes to the sources for this study, for the research. The lack of existing scholarly work regarding translation of subtitles of Paraguayan movies was one of the main ones that we had to face. So we actually used other studies on other movies, foreign movies, that helped us and gave us an idea of how to focus on our study. And also the limitation of books and studies of the linguistic history of Guarani and Jopara languages. We use a lot of grammar books, history books that gave us, we use them as a timeline to be guided by trying to understand better how the Guarani was evolved to today. And also another audience is a limitation, considering that this topic focused on translation and also is something so culturally attached to us. So maybe people that are not interested in Paraguay or in the Guarani, in the language, or even in the cinematography world might not find it interesting. And the importance of this study can be mainly seen by people interested in the art of translation and subtitling, and also for people involved in the audiovisual world. The type of study is descriptive qualitative. The processes for this project were not that boring, actually. I was watching the movie with English subtitles, transcribing the words that were the focus of the study, idioms, slangs, and Jopara, identifying them, identifying the translation techniques used to translate them, and also analyzing them. When we decided to focus on translation and also on Paraguayan movies, it was kind of, there are not a vast list. The list is not very long about when it comes to Paraguayan movies. So we were looking for movies that actually, we needed to decide what requirements this movie needed to meet in order to choose them. So we focused on two different things. That it needed to have Jopara, most of the things were supposed to be in Guarani mixed with Spanish, idioms and slangs, and also it had to have already an English translation. And as a bonus, we wanted popularity too, because most people have watched the movie and it's very famous already. So the movie that met all our expectations was Cajas. And the data collection was based on the subtitles that was provided by the original DVD from the movie. And the selection criteria was focused on the subtitles that contained Jopara, slangs, and idioms as well. The procedure was to watch the movie with the original English subtitles and choose the utterances that contain the focus of the study, idioms, slangs, and Jopara. Then pair the data both in the source language and target language then was to categorize the selected subtitles pairs into slangs, divided into slangs, idioms, and Jopara, and then to proceed with the analysis. Okay, so in the data analysis, as mentioned before, it was collected by watching the movie. So we watched the entire movie, and we wrote actually around 100 or 120 utterances, but we only selected 60. We decided to narrow the list in order not to make it too long, so otherwise it could be boring for the readers. And also we choose these 60 utterances based on which were the most common ones and the easiest ones to translate. So our data analysis consisted of the following steps. First, we read the data, and then we follow or we interpret theories from Molina and Hurtado. So we determine which translation technique was used. According to Molina and Hurtado, there are 7 translation techniques. Then we describe each translation technique that was applied for each word or phrase. And finally, the last step was to find the frequency and find the percentages of the translation techniques that were employed. So this is an example of our charts. There are 60 charts in total. So I included just a few examples in here in order to present them. First, if we follow the translation techniques, we find that there are direct translation techniques. The first direct translation technique is literal translation, in which the process of translation occurs word by word. So as an example here in the source language, we have the word quilombo, and it was translated into a target language as mess. So this is a case of literal translation because it conveys the same meaning and it is a word by word rendition. The same here happens with the word insarte, and it was translated into to value. So this is another case also of literal translation. It says here that the colloquial definition of insarte here in Paraguay is actually to disturb or to bother someone. So the translator was able to accurately convey the message into English. Then another type of translation techniques are the indirect ones. So when there is not possible, or there is no possibility to to do a word-by-word translation, we have indirect translation techniques. So the first one is transposition. What is transposition? Transposition actually occurs at the grammatical level, and it is a change in word class, or it can also be a change in a part of the speech. For example, a noun can be transformed into a verb or vice versa. So here we have the source language Nembotabu. This is actually Nembotabu could be considered an adjective, and it was translated into like a fool. So from an adjective, it was changed into an adverb like article A and adjective fool. And here we have another case of transposition. The source language was Orama. Hora in Spanish means time, and ma in Guarani is actually a suffix that means already. And it was translated into the target language as it is about time. So from noun to suffix, it was changed into pronoun, verb, adverb, and noun. So it is another case of transposition. Then we have the case of modulation. Modulation occurs when there is a change in the point of view, okay, or it is a shift. It is a need to change the perspective. There is a shift in form also. For example, here the source language how pay, que haces, it contains actually 2 phrases. How pay in Guarani, and it is used when to ask if there is something new going on or not, and que haces in Spanish, it actually means what are you doing? So the translators actually combine these 2 phrases into one, and the result was what are you up to? So the original idea was actually well transmitted into the target language. Here we have from the source language, Porque Wau. Wa'u actually comes from the Guarani language, and it is used to present something, or it is also used in joking, or it means something that is fake, and it was translated into why would we do that. So here the modulation technique was also used because the translator needed to find something or an appropriate phrase in order to render the correct meaning. Then we have the technique equivalence. Equivalence, it is one of the most creative techniques because the translator has to actually reformulate the whole word or the phrase in order to find a phrase that it is similar in the target language. So here we have the word tabusha in Guarani, and actually it means it was translated into the word idiot. And here we have the word Aries. Sorry, my Guarani is not that good. Can you correct me? Yarues. Bueno, Yarues. Yarues actually means grandmother. It means grandmother, but it is also used to express that you really, really like something, or you really, really like a situation. So it was translated as the phrase, "It is cool," right? So I know it was completely reformulated into a new phrase, but in order, the translator was able to find an equivalent. Then we have the case of adaptation, and when there in the target culture there is no similar word, the adaptation technique it is used. So here we have the word ballet. Ballet, here in Paraguay, it is used to refer to a person that is really efficient, that is really useful, and it was translated into the word powerful. Another example of an adaptation technique is the word cachafaz, that actually it can mean many things. It can be someone who is lazy, someone who is shameless. So the translator's idea was to combine all the things into two words. So it came with the idea of true man. So these are our findings. We follow the rules or the techniques by Molina Ortel. They were 7, but we only find 5 translation techniques in total. Those were equivalence, from highest to lowest, they were equivalence, adaptation, literal translation, modulation, and transposition. Here we can see the frequency of use of each translation technique. So out of 60 utterances chosen, we find 20 of them were used the equivalence technique, 18 used the adaptation technique, 9 used literal translation, 7 used modulation, and 6 of them were transposition. And on this chart, we have the percentage of use of each translation technique. So a 33% corresponds to equivalence, a 30% corresponds to adaptation, 15% corresponds to literal translation, 12% corresponds to modulation, and only a 10% for transposition. So as it can be seen here, equivalence and adaptation were the 2 most used techniques, followed by literal translation. So as a conclusion, we know that through films, culture and customs of a country can be transmitted. That is why it was important to identify or analyze which strategies and priorities were used in order to translate or create the subtitles for a movie. Especially the case of a culture that is not well known around the world. That is the case of Paraguay and its Guarani language, and that is why it was probably a more difficult task to convey or to translate cultural themes, or even the hidden situations behind the conversation. So among the translation techniques, they were 5, which were applied in the translation of the 60 utterances chosen by the authors, and they were equivalence, adaptation, literal translation, modulation, and transposition. The 2 mostly used translation techniques were equivalence and adaptation. Even though the goal was to obtain a faithful translation, there were some cultural-specific terms that had no equivalent in the target culture. That is the case. That is because of the linguistic style of Warren. So, in some cases, we observed that probably it was more difficult, and also the translator has to follow the rules of subtitling, and then those consist of time. The space was not enough probably, and also that they were at the thing of a time constraint. So the two mostly used translation techniques therefore were equivalent and adaptation. And literal translation was in the third place. So it is still possible to reproduce the same expression in several situations, and this show adherence to the source language. And thank you. That is all. I'm going to stop sharing.
Profesora Aventura.
Yes, Mr. Christopher. Well, ladies, this is a very well-rounded work. And my first question is, did you find in your data something that you weren't happy with the translation? I mean, something that you said, well, maybe this could have had a better translation. The translator didn't do a very good job with this.
Yes, there was. Can I check the one that I was referring to? Let me just give. Let me tell you.
I like the example that they gave where they said that Prophet of Doom would have been better when they were talking about Pájaro de Agüero. And from what I remember, that was the only case really that they made their own suggestion as to what would have been a better choice. Although I remember in the thesis that they did say that they were not going to evaluate the quality per se, but just to see whether the translation technique did convey the meaning.
The idea.
Yes. From the source language, it said pájaro mal agüero, but they translated into asshole. So that is one of the examples that, okay, it could have been better. So we will suggest that they will use bird of ill omen or something like that. There is another one which is pesaditerei. It was translated as bossy. We use the word pesada a lot, and we know what it means. We understand the meaning, the context in which especially is given, right? So we didn't, I mean, I don't want to judge what they did, but I do think that they could have done it better. An expression, it could be something like, I don't know, you're paying the, something like that. Because I do remember when the moment this phrase, the pesaditerei, was given in the movie. They were together, Victor and the girl, I completely forgot now the name. They were together, they were friends, and he wanted to do everything by himself. He was in trouble. So she was trying to help him, but he didn't want it or thought he didn't need the help. So she was still following him, and then he got tired of it, and he told her, pesaditerei. We know that by the situation in that moment, it actually mean like you're a pain in the ass. So it didn't, personally, I didn't believe bossy was the correct translation, but still, I guess for the translators, it was a good word to express the whole situation. But yeah, as mentioned, as it is so culturally attached, we understand the word so easily. So it's also funny in the context in which it's given. So probably that's one of the things I will have changed. But yes.
But you found very few instances where you would have said, well, this maybe doesn't quite convey the idea that the original language provides.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And as translators, because I understand that neither of you two work as translators. Am I right?
No.
Correct.
No.
You're correct.
I'm sorry. So what did you learn from the translation business by doing this research?
Well, it is difficult. It is. In order to be a translator, you have to know the culture of the country. Right? It is extremely important. I mean, you cannot translate if you do not know the culture, if you do not know the customs of the country or the people.
And especially in this case, when we are talking about a dialect and also a language, Guarani and also Jopara, which if you don't live here, if you don't know anything about Paraguay, it probably is going to be extremely hard. I do believe I now more than ever want to learn more about the people who translated this, because I'm sure they probably were provided with more information about the probably the script, obviously, but also the explanation of some vocabulary, because it would have been impossible for them to do something like this. Because also, I was reading the reviews of the movie, and it was considered many. It had a really high review. So it also during the reviews, they mentioned a lot that it was also funny. It had like a dark humor on it. So the translator has such an important role to be able to understand what the script meant and to deliver it correctly. So the receptors all over the world will have the same understanding and the essence wouldn't be missed.
Okay, so let's give the microphone to Ms. Núñez. Ms. Núñez?
Hi, how are you, ladies? It's been a pleasure to listen to you, to read your work on such an interesting and novel topic. At least for me, it was new, it was fresh, it was very interesting. Well, good job on that. My question was similar to what Ms. Bento was going to ask, but my first question was that, which had to do with the challenges, your understanding, how can you understand the local translators better, and the challenges that they face, and you already mentioned that. Now, my second point is, well, we understand that a movie is a portrayal of a culture, right? And Guarani is such an important aspect in this movie to convey our culture and to convey one specific group of people who live in a certain part of our city, right? Which is so traditional and important. How do you think the work of this translation has helped or hindered the understanding of other people that don't know Paraguay? Has it helped? Do you think that it has hindered? What's your take on that after doing all this research and analyzing the work of the translators?
I think it helps a lot in order to understand our culture, because even though we just find just a few things that we didn't agree with the translator, like most of them, they were able to convey exactly the meaning and exactly the situation or what was going on. So I think that the translator or the translation of this movie actually does a good job, and it provides a lot of information about the culture of our country.
Yeah, and I also believe that for people all over the world, I mean, people watching the movie, they probably find it very interesting that I do guess that most when people do not know anything about our country and just say, okay, it's in South America, they probably just relate it to Spanish, which is good because we do speak it, it's our official language. But then when people learn about or watch a movie with a different language, and it's something weird but also very nice, I think that also shows a part of our country that might not be very known for let's say, normal people, because as mentioned before, linguists, also grammarians, and probably other translations are aware of Aztecan, that we do have two official languages here. So I think it offers us something very important, something that identify us, because we know that Paraguayans are very proud to mention that we are bilingual, even when we do not fit exactly in that category. But still, so I think it's really nice to the idea that people are watching the movie and thinking, okay, they do have a second language. They speak English, Spanish, and also this weird language. Okay, nice. So it's really cool. I think that it gives a good impression, even though the movie or the plot is not that positive for us, because I don't know if you have watched the movie, but it's not very, it doesn't show the nice side of our country, but still it gives a lot. It gives
The essence.
the essence, yes, I must say the essence. So yes.
Very much. Ms. Weaver?
Your microphone is off.
Yes, a few of the questions I had asked informally before we started. One of the things I had mentioned is it was interesting to me that the translator was not mentioned in the work. And so I think that now that you have a finished product that you could show, Tanya and Juan Carlos,
Yes.
I mean, they didn't give you very much help, but they
Mhm.
probably have a lot of people trying to get freebies from them because they're famous, you know. But now that you have something that you can show, it might be interesting to find out through them who actually did do the translation, if it's a company, if they're, maybe it's a Paraguayan, who knows? It could be somebody
Yes.
who's lived here. That's why they were able to have this insight into the Jopara.
Yeah.
And if the movie were seen in Turkey, for example, I mean, I understand that Turkish soap operas are very common, are very popular around the world. But if we were to see in Turkish, they might have a dialect, and we wouldn't really know that that was a dialect. That there were two languages going on in the movie.
Yeah.
Only the people who speak Spanish and who watch the movie and then all of a sudden hear the Jopara are going to realize that. Because the other people, I mean, the Spanish speakers are going to see the movie and with no problem, they're not going to realize that aspect of the bilingualism. So my academic questions have been answered pretty much, but I want to ask each of you, what did you think was the most memorable scene in the movie? Not the technique used, but I mean, what impacted you as a viewer of this film?
In my
Fernanda first. Let's hear Fernanda first, because usually speaks after Patricia. So let's hear Fernanda.
Yes, for me was the last scene in which Victor wakes up in a kind of hospital, and he watched the TV, and he is in the TV, on the TV, and he finally got his dream come true, which was to become famous. So I think that gives us hope, that to watch a kid who was nobody somehow, and then he ended up being a hero in his own movie, and he finally made his dreams come true. So I think that's my favorite scene.
Okay, thank you. Patricia?
Yeah, I have, well, it's not a favorite scene, but the scene that impacted me the most was when they were with the phrase when the part where Lali Gonzalez says, "Corre, Victor!" and after they are gunfires and all that. So that was so well created, and I actually couldn't believe that it was from a Paraguayan movie. So the movie, it was excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bueno, I have no other questions, actually. I mean, I took notes about I wanted to ask you, but I don't know if it's important really, because I heard you say that this is a dialect or something. But when you were writing, you talked about Creole, mixed language, diatrastic variety, which I had never heard that word in my life, you know, a diatrastic variety, interlingua, borrowing. You know, there were so many things there, but really, I mean, do you have an idea of what is Jopara actually? I mean, there are all these theories, but what do you girls think?
I do, after reading a lot about it, consider it as a dialect. We looked on the definition of Creole. We tried to actually understand what it actually was, but in my case, I do believe it's a dialect. I don't know. Not
It is
sure
a
yet.
mix of, yes, it is a mix of two languages. So we are not linguists, but yes, we also think it's a dialect for us.
So you think it's like a Creole or something? I mean, it's a fusion.
Yes. I mean, it developed because we know that Paraguayans only in the very beginning. I mean, the Tupi Guarani family they only spoke Guarani. The Spanish came, and Spanish was also introduced to them. Luckily, the Guarani wasn't erased. They were taught. They learned the Guaranians, the native people learned Spanish, but luckily they didn't forget the language, the Guarani. To the contrary, for example, the Jesuits gave a lot of importance to the Guarani. So they are given the I mean, it is considered that thanks to them, the Guarani was still kept and even written in books by then. So it's really hard to say. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But probably I
Neither
still
am I.
consider it a dialect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a tricky question, maybe.
Yeah, it was.
Linguists do not agree on that. All right. Are all questions done then?
Yes,
No
on
more
my
questions.
behalf, yes.
No more questions. All right. So, ladies, would you please leave for a minute, and then I will let you know when you can get in again.
Okay. Okay, again.
Bueno, las chicas, as president of the board of evaluators, I want to congratulate you for finishing this part of your requirement to become licenciadas. Now you are officially our colleagues, so welcome to the club, licenciadas.
Thank
And we evaluated your oral presentation with a 4, your written work with a 5, so your final grade is a 5. Congratulations, licenciadas.
you. Thank you so much.
And Mr. Cristofo would like to take a picture of all of us to record this special moment in history. So smile, say cheese. Well, we can see your smiles, but
Yeah. Smile behind your mask.
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2. Very good. Everything is in the group. The WhatsApp
Super.
group.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
And
let me finish.
group because we might need some personal information to fill out our forms on your behalf, okay?
Okay.
Okay, now I need to give a closure, in fact. Con esto damos por finalizada la disertación de las estudiantes que son flamantes graduadas licenciadas en lengua inglesa, a quienes felicitamos y estamos felices con ellas.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego. Buenas tardes. Chao, chao.
Felicitaciones. Adiós.
Chao, chao. Gracias.